What you give. Family, they say, is forever. But no one ever tells you that forever can be one-sided. That sometimes the rope you use to pull someone back from the edge can become the same one they use to walk away from you, once they've reached solid ground. My name is Alyssa Becker, and 9 months ago I gave my brother the ultimate gift. I donated my kidney to save his life. And then, he erased me from his. Ben and I weren't always close. He was 5 years older, always the golden child, athletic, charming, the kind of boy who teachers adored and girls scribbled hearts around in their notebooks. I was the quieter one, the artist, the one who stayed in on Friday nights to finish a sketch or help mom with laundry. But after our dad died, when I was 16 and Ben was 21, something shifted. He came home. He stepped in. And for a while, he really was my hero. He helped pay bills, taught me to drive, stayed up with me during panic attacks I didn't have language for yet. He made me feel seen, safe, like someone would always have my back. So when the diagnosis came, stage 4 kidney failure at 34, I didn't hesitate. You don't even have to ask, I told him. I'll do it. You're sure? He asked, tears already threatening. This isn't like giving blood. I know, I want to. And I meant it. I'd have given him both if I could. The testing took months. Endless blood work, consultations, evaluations to ensure I wasn't just compatible, but emotionally ready. I passed with flying colors. On surgery day, our mom hugged me tighter than she ever had. You're saving him, she whispered. You're saving my son. She didn't say her daughter was going under a knife too, didn't say thank you. But I let it go. This was about Ben. The surgery went well. Painful, yes. Recovery longer than I expected. But every groggy, ache-filled morning felt worth it when I saw color returning to Ben's face. He was alive. He was smiling again, cracking jokes, walking around, planning his future. And for a few weeks, we were closer than ever. He brought me tea, sat by my bed, called me Kidney Queen, and made me laugh when I thought I couldn't. But then, it started. The fade. At first, it was subtle. He stopped texting back as quickly, didn't return calls, blamed work, recovery stress, mental fog. Then came the missed birthdays, the excuses, the shift from warmth to something cooler, distant. By the 3rd month post-op, I hadn't seen him in 6 weeks, and I lived 20 minutes away. I asked Mom if she knew what was going on. She sighed. Ben's been busy. You know how he gets. I gave him an organ, Mom. He didn't ask. You offered. That one hit harder than the incision in my side. I showed up at his condo unannounced one day, hoping for clarity. He answered the door half-dressed, a drink in hand, clearly mid-party. Liz, what are you doing here? You've been ghosting me. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic? I gave you a part of me. You haven't spoken to me in weeks. He exhaled, annoyed. I didn't ask you to. That sentence broke something in me. He didn't just forget. He rewrote it, like my sacrifice was a favor he never wanted. I left before I cried, blocked his number that night. But the pain didn't leave with him, because betrayal by strangers is survivable. But betrayal by blood, that bleeds differently. And that was just the beginning. Because what I didn't know then was that Ben wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The thankless hero. After I blocked Ben's number, I expected silence. But what followed was worse. Noise, coming from every direction except the one that mattered. Our mother called a week later. Not to check on me, but to tell me I'd embarrassed the family. You showed up at his house uninvited, during a private gathering. That's not okay, Alyssa. He hasn't called in months. He's healing. So am I. She went quiet for a beat. You didn't do this for attention, did you? That one stung worse than Ben's coldness. I wanted to scream. Ask her why she couldn't see the slow erasure happening in front of her. Why she did not care that I was the one left with a scar, not just on my body, but in every room he used to be in. But instead, I hung up. Because some conversations aren't meant to be salvaged. It took me 2 more weeks to learn the truth. It started with a message request on Instagram, a name I didn't recognize, Danielle S. Hey, sorry if this is weird, but I think we need to talk. It's about Ben. I hesitated, clicked. What I saw left my blood cold. Screenshots, photos, a pregnancy announcement. Ben and Danielle, hand in hand, grinning at a beachside gender reveal party. Can't wait to meet our little man, so grateful to the donor who made this new life possible. A comment beneath it from someone else. Wow, thought he was sick? Danielle's reply. He's all good now. His sister was the real MVP. 1 kidney, endless gratitude. Even if she's complicated. Complicated. I stared at that word until it blurred. The party I'd crashed wasn't just a casual get-together. It was a baby celebration. And I hadn't even known she was pregnant, let alone that I'd been reduced to a supporting character in their narrative. I messaged Danielle back. What do you mean, complicated? Why did you reach out? She replied within minutes. He said you were struggling emotionally, that you were pulling away, maybe regretting the donation. I just wanted to make peace before the baby comes. I think he's scared to deal with you. I almost dropped the phone. He was rewriting me, turning my grief, my confusion, my sacrifice into a liability, a threat. A story that painted him as the misunderstood hero, and me as the unstable sister who could not handle her own decisions. But it didn't stop there. I dug deeper, looked through more public posts, family comments, side threads I hadn't been tagged in. Ben had started telling people he'd pressured me into the surgery, that it had been a dark time, that he regretted accepting it, because I had used it to guilt him forever. None of it was true, but it was spreading. Fast. I met with a therapist the following week, not because I wanted to heal, but because I didn't know what else to do with the rage. Dr. Kessler listened without judgment, then said something I'll never forget. You didn't just give him an organ. You gave him permission to live, and now, he doesn't know how to look you in the eye without feeling like he owes you everything. So he rewrites the story, I whispered. Exactly, because people would rather change the truth than confront the weight of their own survival. I sat with that for a long time, and slowly, something shifted. This wasn't just abandonment. This was theft, of my narrative, of my dignity, of the truth, and I wasn't going to let it stand. I began documenting everything, every message, every screenshot, every post, not to attack him, but to protect myself, because I knew, deep down, the next chapter wasn't going to be quiet, and when it came, I wanted to be ready. Block 3. Rewriting my own story. It started small, a private blog, password protected, just for me. I called it What You Give. Each night, I poured my heart into entries, not just the betrayal, but the surgeries, the hospital smells, the way I counted ceiling tiles before the anesthesia took me under. I wrote about the first night after surgery when I vomited from the pain meds, and Ben held my hair back. I wrote about the time he cried in my arms at 19 because he didn't think he'd ever be enough for Dad. I wrote about everything, because I needed to remember that what we had was real, even if he had chosen to forget it. 3 weeks into the blog, I posted a piece titled, Organ Donor, Not Emotional Doormat. It wasn't about Ben by name, but it was about what he'd done. And for the first time, I made the post public, It took off like wildfire. Strangers found it. So did other donors, people who'd given kidneys, bone marrow, even partial livers, and had been ghosted, used, discarded. Apparently, I wasn't the only one. Apparently, sacrificial abandonment was a hidden epidemic. The emails flooded in. I thought I was the only one. My brother hasn't spoken to me in 2 years either. They made me feel like I was crazy for expecting gratitude. The solidarity was unexpected, but powerful. I created a Facebook group, The Silent Givers. Hundreds joined in days. I hosted live chats, brought in medical experts, lawyers. We weren't just venting, we were organizing. I never mentioned Ben directly, but he found the blog anyway. I knew because I got a cease and desist from his lawyer. Your client, Benjamin Becker, believes the content of your blog to be defamatory and emotionally harmful. We request immediate removal and retraction. I laughed. Out loud. Alone. He was scared. Not of violence, not of exposure, but of people finally knowing that he wasn't the golden son anymore. I wrote back, politely. Everything shared is true, documented, and protected under freedom of expression. No names, no identifiers. But if your client insists, I am happy to name him in a formal memoir instead. Silence. The cease and desist was never followed up. I wish I could say my mother came around. She didn't. She sent one final text. You're making a spectacle out of something you offered. Your father would be ashamed. I stared at the message for a full minute, then deleted it. And her number. Because I wasn't going to let their version of me be the one that lasted. And that's when the real shift began. A podcast invited me on to tell my story. Then another. A publishing agent reached out. A college pre-med class asked me to speak. People weren't just listening, they were learning. Ben tried to discredit me. I heard from a mutual friend, said I was obsessed, bitter. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the truth had legs now, and it was walking straight into places his lies couldn't reach. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. For what, I didn't yet know. But I'd spent too long bleeding silently. Now, I was standing, loudly. Block 4. When the curtain falls. If there's one thing I learned from publicly telling my story, it's this. People don't like to look at heroes and realize they've been frauds all along. Ben had built a life around being admired. He thrived in spaces where people called him inspirational, especially now. Newly healed, soon-to-be father, overcoming medical odds. A comeback kid. But my story, our story, disrupted that. It didn't scream. It whispered. It didn't accuse. It questioned. And in the quiet spaces between what was said and what was suggested, people began to wonder, who really is Benjamin Becker? It started with Danielle. She reached out again. This time it wasn't just a DM. She called. I think I made a mistake, she said, voice tight. With Ben? I asked, knowing the answer. He told me you tried to sabotage our relationship, that you were unstable. And now? She sighed. He lied about other things too. Money, past relationships. He said you only donated to control him. But after reading the blog, I don't know. There was a pause. I left him, took the baby. I'm staying at my sister's. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I felt relief. Not because he'd been left, but because the web was unraveling. And I wasn't the only one pulling at the threads. A week later, I received an email. Subject line, Media Inquiry, NY Journal. We're running a story on patient-donor dynamics post-transplant. Your blog and advocacy group were brought to our attention. Would you be open to speaking with us? My breath caught. This was it. Validation, visibility, but also risk. Once my name went in print, There'd be no more ambiguity. Ben would be linked to the story, even if indirectly. My family would see it. The medical center that performed the transplant, his friends, our old neighbors. But I said yes, because some truths deserve light, even if they burn on the way up. The interview was respectful. The journalist, meticulous. She fact-checked every timeline. Asked for documentation. Let me read the draft before publishing. The article ran 2 weeks later. Front page of the Sunday Human Interest section. Title: She gave her brother a kidney. Then he cut her out. It was raw, honest, balanced. It quoted my blog, highlighted the silent givers. It even featured a quote from Dr. Kessler, who validated the emotional aftermath many donors experience. Within hours, it was trending on social media. Within days, other outlets picked it up. Ben responded exactly how I expected, through gritted teeth and controlled rage. He posted a long clarification on LinkedIn, the platform where he curated his image most carefully. I'm grateful to my sister for her donation, but I believe in moving forward, not marinating in pain. It's unfortunate she's chosen a path of public grievance. I didn't reply. Others did. One comment stood out. Moving forward doesn't mean erasing your past. It means owning it. She gave you life. The least you can do is tell the truth. It had over 9,000 likes. Then came the hospital inquiry. Apparently, the transplant board had seen the article. They reached out, not to me, but to him. They wanted to review the psychological evaluations conducted before the procedure. Rumors swirled. He may have downplayed mental health issues, may have concealed relational dynamics. The walls were closing in. But not because I'd built them. He had, with lies, with omissions, with silence. All I'd done was shine a flashlight on the foundation, and it was cracking. People often say revenge is bitter, but this wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. Block 5, the cost of clarity. The story didn't end with articles or shares. The ripple effect kept expanding. In courtrooms, in inboxes, and most importantly, inside of me. Because once the silence broke, I couldn't unhear the things I'd long ignored. The subtle dismissals, the way our mother always made space for Ben's messes but demanded I get over mine. The old birthday parties where Ben arrived late, giftless, and still left with all the praise. The times he borrowed money and forgot to pay it back. The way I was the one who stayed close after Dad died, and yet he got the sympathy for simply showing up once a month. When you start peeling back betrayal, you don't just find fresh wounds, you uncover old ones. I received a certified letter from Ben's lawyer a week after the LinkedIn post. This one wasn't a cease and desist. It was a threat. Our client is considering legal action for defamation and emotional distress. The irony was surreal. IT donated a kidney, and now he was threatening to sue me for hurting his feelings. I called my attorney, Lisa, a tough, sharp woman I'd met through the Silent Givers network. She read the letter, laughed once, then said, "Let him try." She helped me draft a response. We welcome any legal proceedings. Please be advised that our countersuit will include medical documentation, surgical records, written communication, and statements from mutual parties. We are also prepared to subpoena any relevant psychological evaluations submitted during the transplant process. It was the most satisfying letter I'd ever signed. But legal fire wasn't my only concern. The blog was booming. I was getting offers, a book deal, a TEDx talk, even a documentary pitch from an indie production company. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, I felt cautious. Because somewhere, buried beneath my armor, I still felt like a sister. And part of me wondered, if Ben came back, remorseful, would I forgive him? I hated that I didn't know the answer. And then he did come back. Not with an apology, but in person. I was speaking at a university event on medical ethics. Afterward, during the Q&A, someone stood up in the back row. Dark hoodie, eyes hard. Do you think turning a family issue into a brand makes you credible or manipulative? There was a pause in the room. Gasps, whispers. I froze. Not because of the question, but because I recognized the voice. Ben. I stepped closer to the microphone, felt every eye on me, and then I said, "Credibility isn't about being flawless. It's about being honest. Manipulation is pretending to be a victim when you're actually a thief." He didn't say another word. He left. But the damage, to him, was already done. The moderator turned to me and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. I was more than okay. For the first time in months, I was standing in front of strangers, telling the truth, while the lie sat in the back and squirmed. That night, I wrote a new blog post titled, "The Day the Ghost Showed Up." It went viral. Again. Only this time, people weren't just seeing a story of organ donation gone wrong. They were seeing a story of courage, of refusal to be erased, of power reclaimed. But with visibility came danger. Ben began leaking private texts to tabloids. Our mother gave a statement to a gossip magazine, painting me as exaggerated and opportunistic. It was clear. The family line had been drawn, and I wasn't on the inside anymore. But I didn't care, because when the truth costs you your silence, you learn how to speak with purpose. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Block 6. Justice in black ink. It started with a question from my attorney, Lisa. "Are you ready to fight this formally?" I paused. Not because I wasn't, but because the word fight used to scare me. Now it felt like armor. Let's do it. We filed a pre-litigation notice against Ben for defamation, emotional distress, and breach of verbal contract. Our case was straightforward. I donated a vital organ under the pretense of familial trust and mutual respect. In return, I was not only erased, I was publicly discredited, humiliated, and antagonized. We had emails, texts, social media posts. We had timelines. We had intention. Ben had turned me into a villain for doing what he once called the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. The hypocrisy wasn't just visible, it was documented. The media caught wind. The NY Journal updated their article with the headline, "Organ Donor Files Suit Against Brother for Post-Transplant Defamation." This time, the public's response was thunderous. Not just applause, outrage, because people weren't just angry on my behalf, they were angry on their own. People who'd forgiven too much, trusted too blindly, and finally saw their stories mirrored in mine. Then came the panel invitations, medical symposiums, ethics boards, policy forums. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a spokesperson. We started pushing for legislation, the Donor Dignity Act, a bill proposing that post-transplant donors receive legal protections against defamation, neglect, or manipulation directly tied to their donation. It was symbolic at first. Then senators took notice. One called me personally. "Your bravery is igniting something. Keep pushing." Meanwhile, Ben's world was shrinking. Danielle gave a deposition in support of me, confirming he'd lied about my motives, misrepresented our family dynamics, and even joked that he would have made her do it if she hadn't offered. That statement became central to our case. He tried to block its inclusion. He failed. Our mother stayed loyal to him. But in whispers, distant relatives reached out. "We always knew you were the glue, Alyssa. Your father would have been proud." I didn't need their pity, but I held on to their words like breadcrumbs in a long, dark forest. Then, something unexpected happened. Alyssa the sister, Alyssa the donor, Alyssa the blogger. They began to merge into someone else, Alyssa the advocate. And she wasn't afraid. Not of courts, not of backlash, not even of family estrangement. Because what I'd lost, blood, peace, silence, was nothing compared to what I was building. A legacy of resilience. We settled the case in mediation. Ben agreed to a public apology, a retraction of all defaming statements, and a contribution of $50,000 to the Silent Giver's legal fund. He didn't smile when he signed, neither did I, but I walked out of that room feeling whole for the first time in years. It wasn't about money, it was about message. You can't take from someone and then decide they no longer matter, not without consequence, not anymore. Block 7, What Comes After the War. The morning after the settlement, I woke up expecting something big, some tidal shift in my soul. But it was quiet. Just sunlight across the hardwood floor, coffee brewing, the hum of my neighbor's dog barking at a squirrel again. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for another hit. That was new. That was peace. I updated the blog with one final entry, titled, "The Body Keeps the Score, but So Do I." It wasn't angry. It wasn't triumphant. It was a love letter to every part of myself I had ignored in the name of family. To my body, for surviving 2 surgeries and years of anxiety. To my voice, for returning stronger after being silenced. To my intuition, for screaming when others told me I was overreacting. I wrote it and hit publish. Then I closed the tab. Not because I was done telling stories, but because that one, at last, had an ending. I kept speaking, but now it wasn't just about Ben. It was about healthcare ethics, relational boundaries, recovery that doesn't always look like a straight line. I spoke at Johns Hopkins, then UCLA, then a conference in Toronto. Strangers approached me with tears in their eyes. "You saved my life. You gave me language for what happened to me. You reminded me I'm not crazy." Each time I felt lighter, because what had once been a burden was now a bridge. Lisa, my attorney, became more than just a legal guide. We started a nonprofit together, Voice After Vitality, focused on protecting donor rights, offering trauma-informed support, and rewriting the narrative that love means silence. We created scholarships, mental health stipends, even an annual retreat for those recovering not just physically, but emotionally. I watched people walk into those spaces hunched over with shame and leave with their shoulders back. And Ben, he faded, quietly, as most manipulators do once they've lost control of the narrative. I heard he took a job in a new city. I heard Danielle filed for full custody and won. I heard our mother moved in with him, that they were now each other's mirrors, reflecting the lies they clung to like lifeboats. But I didn't check. I didn't follow, because part of healing is refusing to stare backward when the path ahead is finally clear. I started dating again, slowly, tenderly. There was a man named Noah, kind eyes, slow laugh. He read my blog before we ever met in person, said it was the bravest thing he'd read in a decade, said, "If you can live through that and still open your heart, I'd be a fool not to show up fully." And he did, for 2 years, until he proposed, in the middle of a donor gala. With my favorite poet reading a line I once wrote, "We are not fragile because we broke. We are fierce because we rebuilt." I said yes, not just to him, but to me. To the version of Alyssa who survived betrayal and became a lighthouse, not in spite of the storm, but because of it. Block 8. The letter I never sent. Some wounds don't bleed anymore, but they still leave fingerprints. Even after the settlement, after the nonprofit, after Noah. There were nights I'd lie awake, scrolling through photos from a decade ago. Ben holding my birthday cake. Us in college sweatshirts, laughing, normal. The betrayal hadn't erased those memories, but it had reframed them, like someone adjusting the lighting on a portrait until the subject looks like a stranger. I began therapy again, not because I was broken, but because I was healing in layers. And the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just about him. It was about me, about how I learned to give so fully that I forgot how to ask, about how I equated loyalty with silence, about how I confused endurance with love. Dr. Simone, my therapist, asked me one day, "What would you say to Ben if you weren't afraid of how he'd respond?" I thought for a long time. Then I wrote. Not to send, just to say, "Dear Ben, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. I forgive you for letting me believe that love was transactional, that family meant debt, that pain was just the cost of belonging. I forgive you for shrinking me every time you needed to feel taller, for lying when the truth was easier, for using my body like a tool and calling it a bond. I forgive you because I will not let your choices define the rest of my story. I forgave you the day I looked in the mirror and didn't see your shadow on my shoulder anymore. We are not family anymore, but you were once my brother, and I loved you. That love may be gone, but the person who gave it, she's still here, and she's finally free." I read the letter aloud in a support group that night. There were tears, not just mine, but from others who had carried betrayal for too long. Because we weren't just healing, we were naming. And when you name a thing, it loses its grip. That summer, Voice After Vitality helped pass a version of the Donor Dignity Act in 2 states. It required hospitals to offer post-donation mental health support and protection from targeted defamation. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. At a celebration gala, I gave a speech. Noah stood backstage, smiling. Lisa winked from table 3. I looked out at the sea of faces and said, "We are not defined by what was taken from us. We are defined by what we choose to build in its place." Applause, flashbulbs, tears. I walked off stage and hugged a girl no older than 20 who had given bone marrow to her father and never heard from him again. She whispered, "Thank you for surviving." I smiled. Thank you for not letting it end there. Healing isn't linear. It isn't clean. It isn't poetic. But every once in a while, it is powerful. And I was living proof. Block 9. The echo that came back. I was walking through the corridor of the Wellness Center, the place where Voice After Vitality had just opened its first physical location, when I heard my name. "Alyssa?" I turned, and there he was. Ben, older, thinner, hair grayer at the edges, no entourage, no smugness, just tired. The fluorescent lights flickered above us like the universe didn't know how to stage this moment. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just stared. Because for the first time, I saw him without the mask. Not the manipulator, not the patient. Just a man standing in the shadow of his own consequences. We sat in the garden behind the center, the same garden we had designed for donor recovery guests, a space meant to bring peace after pain. He sat awkwardly on the bench across from me. "You've done a lot," he said, nodding toward the building. "I've been following." I raised an eyebrow. "You've been watching?" He nodded. Not like stalking, just reading, listening. I read the blog, even the last post. Silence. Birds chirped overhead, too bright for the mood. "I didn't come to argue," he added quickly. "I know I was wrong. I waited. Because for once I didn't need to fill the silence for him. I lost everything, he continued. My job, Danielle, my credibility. I deserved it. But I just wanted you to know. I do regret it." Still, I said nothing. Not yet. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this when the article came out. Never sent it." He handed it to me. I didn't unfold it, just held it. Heavy, like a kidney in a cooler. "You don't have to read it," he said. "I just wanted to face you." I met his eyes. And this time, I didn't see the brother who betrayed me. I saw a man crushed under the weight of who he could have been. I stood up. He flinched, not in fear, in shame. But I didn't yell, didn't scold, didn't forgive. I said, I rebuilt my life without you. I did it while carrying your survival inside my body. I don't hate you, but I don't need you anymore. Then I walked away. I didn't read the letter, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew the ending. He was sorry, and that would have to be enough. For him. That night I sat in the garden alone, the same bench, the same silence, and I wept. Not for him, not for what we'd lost, but for the girl I used to be. The one who kept giving, hoping he'd finally stay. She was gone now, but she had led me here, and I was grateful. Because closure isn't a door slammed shut. It's a door you walk past without needing to knock ever again. Block 10, the life I grew into. 3 years later, I stood in front of a different audience. Not journalists, not senators, not trauma survivors, but children, at an elementary school library, reading a picture book I'd written about organ donation and kindness, illustrated with vibrant colors and wide-eyed wonder. The room was filled with laughter and questions. Did it hurt? Were you scared? Did your brother say thank you? I smiled, softly, and answered truthfully. Yes, a little, and not exactly. But I learned something important anyway. They leaned in. Sometimes being kind doesn't change other people. It changes you. Later, as I packed up my things, the school counselor approached me. That was incredible. You made something so big feel safe. I nodded, because that's what healing had become for me. Taking something sharp and reshaping it into something that didn't cut anymore. My life wasn't perfect. There were still shadows, still triggers when I saw certain articles, still twinges in my side when the weather shifted, a reminder of the scar below my ribcage. But those scars didn't ache the way they used to. They were stories now, written in flesh, signed with resilience. Noah and I moved into a small house by the coast, not glamorous, but sunlit, with lemon trees and floorboards that creaked like honest laughter. I kept speaking, kept writing, but I also started painting. Landscapes, abstracts, women with fire in their spines and oceans in their eyes. At our nonprofit, we began an art therapy program, and one day, a girl came to me holding a canvas that said, I gave too much, but I kept the best part. Me. I cried in front of her, didn't apologize, because some tears are sacred. On the 4th anniversary of the surgery, I hosted a virtual event. Donors, advocates, families. And I closed the evening with a toast. To everyone who gave something they couldn't get back, and still found a way to grow forward. Hundreds of faces raised glasses. Juice, wine, water. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we were no longer quiet. We were no longer ashamed. We were visible. And Ben? I hadn't heard from him since the day in the garden. Last I knew, he'd moved abroad. Teaching English, someone said. Trying to start over. I didn't chase the details, because my story no longer hinged on his name. It never should have. I planted a tree outside our center last spring. A sapling, donated anonymously. It grew fast, strong. Its roots dug deep without asking permission. Just like mine. I named it Grace, not because he earned it, but because I did.